All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the City of Farmers Branch Study Session meeting. It is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. The time is 4 p.m. We will begin with A1, discuss regular agenda items. Councilmember Ratana.
None for me.
Councilmember Williams.
None for me.
Councilmember Len.
I have a question about H5, please. So, with respect to murals, there was some language in here that said existing murals are exempt from this whole ordinance, but does that include and extend to the maintenance of existing murals?
Well, the maintenance of existing murals would be governed by, where's Leo here?
You will
Okay.
be here.
He will be here.
Case
It
in,
should be maintained by the regular property maintenance.
Right.
okay, case in point, and I brought this up the last time we had this discussion, is the tire store across the way and the west wall, which has peeling paint. It can be considered a mural.
Actually, no.
Why
By
not?
definition, let me sit down here. So the definition that has been proposed under the ordinance, it will not be considered mural. It will be considered just paint.
As a what?
As paint, wall paint, exterior.
Well, there's writing there on the wall, so would that constitute a sign?
Would it be a graffiti? I haven't seen the writing, so
Okay,
is it a sign?
well,
Okay, I see Charles nodding his head, so it's probably a sign.
I
so,
guess the short answer is, we'll deal with property maintenance code for for exempt murals to the extent it's a mural, as it were, just like we would any other. And if it's a sign, then we'll deal with it under sign regulations. But
okay, but it does present a problem. I understand she hasn't seen it, and if we don't know whether it's a mural or a sign or just a painted wall, it's got to fall in some category, and so I can see where,
Regardless if it's a mural or a sign, if it's peeling and in bad shape, it falls under the property maintenance code and has to be addressed. It'd be a violation of the property maintenance code at that point. So it doesn't matter what we call it, a sign or a mural, it's still regulated by the same property maintenance code.
okay, all right.
well said, Charles, thank you.
I just wanted to make sure, because we do have existing buildings that have paint,
Issues.
graphics, whatever on them, and I just wanted to know whether
Graffiti.
they would be covered. So, all right, that's all I had, thank you.
Councilmember Merritt.
Nothing at this time, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Not today, thank you, Mayor.
All right.
Mayor, I'm sorry. I did have one more question. I'm sorry, I completely forgot about the mural. So did we decide then on this ordinance that we would not allow for because it sounded like we weren't going to allow if anything that represented anything that went on in that business?
Yes, we are going to allow business-related content, but not the text or
The
name
logo.
or the logo.
Perfect. Because on one of the presentations, it looked like we were saying, no, you can't do that.
Okay.
So if I could follow up, sorry. So again, I'm using this as an example, not as anything that's been requested, but if a hardware store had a picture of a bunch, or had a painting or mural of a bunch of tools, that's okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure.
Has this inspired anyone else to ask any other questions about murals?
Hopefully
No?
not.
All right, moving on then. Thank you very much. We will jump to A2. Receive a report from Atomic DC on city communications platforms.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. Good afternoon. Jeff Brady, Director of Communications. So as most of you know, we did launch a new website about a year ago in July of 2021. And so it's been up and running ever since. And so about a few months ago, in conversation with our city manager, our communications department wanted to do an independent audit or assessment of the website, kind of our digital billboard, and how we present to the world, whether that's a new resident or a commercial entity. And so we looked far and wide, and we're lucky enough to find an agency right here in our own backyard, Atomic Design and Consulting, been in business for 20 years, and they specialize in SEO, digital marketing, and inbound marketing efforts. And so Jackie Beesey is here now with Chris Bingham, a digital marketing specialist, and they're going to provide an overview and executive summary of their audit, not only of the website, but of all of our communications channels within the city. So, Jackie.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you for allowing us to come up here and share some of the findings. Chris is here to help me with the technical issues. He's the one who did most of the auditing there, so if we get into any specific questions, I may ask him to come up here. First off, we started out looking at the website. You guys are doing a lot of great things on the website. Number one, it is a massive website, has a lot of content on it, and you've done a really good job of making sure that the content from all the different departments is represented on the website really well. One of the things, so just the space bar.
Should work.
There we go.
There we go.
There we
Now.
go. There we go. Technical guy trying to figure out
That's
technical
it.
stuff, right? So one of the things that we noticed that we feel could be done better is really making some adjustments to the navigation. If you go through the website, one of the things that you're going to notice as you surf through the website and go into different departments, the navigation completely changes, which is not a consistent thing that happens on most websites when you're on there. So one of the things that we would say is let's get with Civic Plus and figure out a way to get that information organized in a way that you can actually have a consistent navigation throughout the piece. The other piece with the navigation specifically was the drop downs are I'm sure you've seen massive. I would reckon that some of you on your tablets and maybe even your laptops can't even see all the selections without scrolling. So this is where it really would behoove you to come in and really organize this and pare that information down and allow the user to get to those departments and sections quicker and then get to the information they're looking for. We have seen on some other websites, like the Plano website or something, they have little drop downs. There is also a Civic Plus website that have drop downs that allow you to kind of get to those information, those pieces really quick. We also think you did a great job of trying to select what are the people going to be most interested in and giving them those buttons right up there front and center, online payments, submitting requests. So that was a really good job, and so we thought that worked out well. One of the other pieces that's a new, we'll call it feature on Civic Plus, I guess, was the news and the way that the news is put onto the website. On the homepage specifically, when you click it, it actually replaces up above and really kind of doesn't work well on the site. So that's a piece that I think is in the process of getting addressed and looking at being just corrected, I guess what I would say. And one of the final pieces that we would say on just kind of the UX aspect of it is having stronger calls to action. As we're trying to get people more involved in your email marketing newsletters, following you on social media, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, wherever the person chooses, really taking people to that and making sure that we have really no dead-end paths. So once someone gets to a certain area, how do we get them to extend that relationship with you digitally? So we're always looking to get as many hooks into the people visiting the site as possible, and that would be through the newsletter and through the social media and any text campaigns and those types of things like that as well. When we went through the site, we also noticed that there were some technical issues, and we've spared everyone from all the boring stuff inside of this because it gets really very bad. But so the site speed issues, those are things that can be worked with Civic Plus to make sure that we can get the site to load quicker. Some of that is a function of how much JavaScript is required to load those menus, so we can get some of those things pared down. That'll be great. Some of it's just the coding architecture in and of itself, all things that can be done, modified in the future. Finally, the one thing, accessibility is obviously growing on the web, and it's very important. Civic Plus has some pieces built into the software to allow for accessibility. And what that does is brings up a little menu bar basically that says, read this to me, skip to the navigation, increase contrast, increase font size, those types of things. And those are all features that can be done relatively straightforward on the website, and that's something that we would definitely recommend that you guys implement inside of that. As we move on into your social, one of the things that we noticed is we went and looked at some of the paid ads that are running, and those are really set up really well. So the people you have managing those right now are doing a great job. They're setting up great audiences, and the ads that they're putting are taking people to the correct places, and the budgets that are being associated with it are set up well as well. One of the things that we might recommend is putting out some more engaging content to your followers on social, maybe running contests, polls, photo shares, getting people to share. It's called user-generated content. Let's get them sharing more pictures of the events that they're attending in the city, just getting more of that engagement inside of there. We also recommending having a branded, standardized format for the photos and graphics that you put on there. So when people see this, it's an immediate recognition that this is from Farmers Branch. And, so it just kind of connects. And so you can kind of see these pictures here, and put something out there, having the logo in a consistent spot or some type of branding effect on there. One other piece that we mentioned on the social was looking at using hashtags, making sure that the hashtags are used more consistently through all the posts that are going on. I know that you have a lot of people that are managing a lot of different content flow pieces on that, and so there's some things that another recommendation that we'll make here in the future is having a person to oversee all of that, and that's really becoming very critical as we move forward. The other thing is implementing an evergreen content. So those are the types of things that happen every single year. So it really makes the process easier to know what you're going to put out there, have an easy to manage content calendar. And so I'm sure you have some of the same type events happening every single year. So having a system already in place so that you can easily put content around 4th of July celebrations or different things that you have going on inside of the city. The email marketing, you've got great open rates. We work with a lot of people on email marketing, and when we pulled up your open rates, you have a fantastic open rate. I don't recall right off the top of my head, Chris, was it?
I want to say it was almost 20s.
Okay, 20s and 30s, yeah. So you have a lot of people opening it. The one thing that we did recognize was that there was a lot of content in the email. So paring that information back, it's a tough thing to do. A lot of people always want to put everything that's going on inside of that. And I'd really recommend developing a section of the site that kind of allows for that. And you're going to have key stakeholders, but pulling that information back, and really less is more truly on that kind of stuff. Also using just better subject lines. What we're seeing all over the place is that emojis, keeping subject lines short, less than 30 characters, 9 words, is one of the things that can help improve just engagement on the campaigns as well. Again, we've already kind of talked about it, but the better location and visibility for the sign-up forms, just really driving people to join that newsletter and engage with that newsletter so that we can get them if they're not actively going out to the website or social. Search engine optimization, that's something we do a ton of, and right now you're doing a great job. Basically, if you put the word Farmers Branch in any of the keywords, you're showing up. That's kind of the nature of the beast. Your website is massive, has a lot of content, it's got a lot of authority as well. It's really pretty much exactly what we expected to happen in there. There are some technical SEO things that we might look at improving, so you could have even more keywords that you're ranking for, maybe around the event-based saying senior programs and some things like that. And there's some areas that we could do deeper dives and help Parks Department or events or whatever come up with ways to attract more people into that. But truthfully, you're doing a really good job when it comes to the SEO side of things. Again, getting back into the technical things, this is some stuff that we've already addressed with Civic Plus, and they've already made some changes to some of the technical elements, and I believe they're on a path to fix the others, which is fantastic. But 404 pages, which is basically a broken page on the site that doesn't exist anymore, running a report and finding out what all those are, and either redirecting those to wherever the new page exists, or just putting new content in those pages that are broken. So those would be all things that we would be looking at there. And then from the search engine marketing and the paid media, your audience targeting is doing well. One of the things that we would recommend is just looking at geo-targeting a little bit closer on some of the zip codes on that as well. Your click-through rates are on par. You're doing, overall, like I said before, you're doing a good job on all those pieces. So, your cost per impressions are really low. Just working on trying to find ways to get people to engage with anything that you are actively paying to have ads out there. That's why we recommend polls and user comments and user generated comments. So we really look at that kind of information as we go forward. Talked about the brand consistency already as well. So sometimes people are putting a lot of words into the post. So again, just a less is more kind of thing is something that we would look at and make a recommendation on there. And so as we talk about the key recommendations, when we look at the website, the biggest things that we feel like you should really focus in on are those broken links, the 404s. Some of the issues have already been addressed since the audits transpired. So getting redirects set up, going to pages, making sure that they're all pointing to the right place. That's important for search engine optimization, for just users using the website as well. The Google business and social platforms, right now that's one of the biggest pieces that people are really starting to, when they Google something, the Farmers Branch GMB is what it's called, Google My Business listing is showing up, and making sure that you're posting content through that, and that's going to be one of the areas that people are seeing it on their phones and just getting on there. So making sure you have the consistency of how often you're posting and what you're posting on there, and just making sure that it's all consistent with the brand. We've already talked about the email overhauls and UX and updates and accessibility. Again, I want to just kind of touch on that. I would really be pushing Civic Plus to start working on the accessibility. And then as we look into key staffing recommendations as you move forward, we really feel like getting a webmaster and a social media person is going to be important to you. Really, websites are the primary way that people are getting information from the city. And so it's moved beyond having a person that does it in their spare time when they're not doing their real job kind of thing, So getting someone involved so that you can have that strategic thinking about where you're going to be, what you're going to do, and then someone that can help build out those consistent graphics. And then, as we all know, the Hispanic population is growing as well, so you really need to consider someone that has bilingual capabilities so that you can have bilingual content on your website. Being able to serve everyone is just so massively important. That's why we're talking about accessibility quite a bit. And so looking at that, those are two roles that I would really recommend you start to consider bringing on to help you manage all this massive website with all this content. So someone that can make sure all those type of things are being addressed. So I can open it up for any questions that anyone might have that we went through there.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And I know this was specifically important to you, Councilmember Merritt, so I'll let you open up with the questions.
Thank you very much, Jack, for the presentation. I really agree with all of the recommendations that you made related to the site, the 5 that you've outlined. I had an opportunity to talk with Jeff and Charles as we've gone along with this. I think these are, your staffing recommendations fit right into a longer-term vision of bringing the quality and the content to the par and the exceeding par level that we really want.
Right.
So I really want to thank Jeff for arranging this, and thank you and your team for putting this together.
Yeah,
And I look forward to talking amongst my colleagues here about how we make some of these recommendations come to fruition. So,
absolutely,
you.
absolutely. We're happy to help in any way.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Lynn
No comment.
Williams.
Thank you very much. I'm actually doing this with our company, my personal company right now. And so, and it's so funny because we just hired a webmaster and a social media content creator. So that, and we're a much smaller organization than what the city is. So, I mean, it's right on par with everything. I just keep hearing the same thing again, so, you know, I feel like
Absolutely.
y'all are giving us some really good information and some really good data. So, I'm excited to see what we can do to start initiating some of those changes.
Perfect.
Councilmember
you.
Rotana.
Yes, I agree. This is something that I think we've been talking about for a while now. I did have two quick questions. As far as the like having the webmaster and the social media manager for, as part of the strategy, do they usually, or you all usually engage in some type of focus group to kind of help navigate best practice when it comes to, because someone that's familiar like me and someone that is
Right.
not, that is just a resident, is gonna have a very different experience as to how to navigate the system. And so, I know that in other areas, there have been focus groups to bring folks in to kind of play with it, to figure out what do you like, what do you not like, what to make it easier. Is that something that's normal, or is this webmaster kind of the know-all and kind of put that all together?
Yeah, no, that's a great practice to do, and there's a lot of ways to do it. You can get citizens to come in, give them a sheet of typical things that they might be interested in doing, or even have them have their own. We've also done it with like a Google survey where we'll send it out and you can actually specify the area that you want people to be responding within and give them a set of tasks and have them, try to accomplish the task and then fill out a survey on the backside. How easy was it? What are your recommendations? How long did it take you to get or accomplish a specific task? There's another software that you might consider as well, and I didn't put this on here, maybe I should have. We use something called Lucky Orange, and it actually allows you to watch people surfing the website. So you can see and you can tag different things, so Parks and Rec or events or whatever it may be, and you can see how they actually went to the website, and it's extremely telling because you can see how often they're hitting back and then going to a page and clicking a different link or something. So just from watching that in and of itself, you can learn a lot about user behavior and what they're doing. But, the webmaster will have, ideas and know best practices and things like that, but it's always a great idea to try to get, some additional input.
Thank you. No, and I think that's very necessary to try to have different folks in the room to kind of tell us. And I love the kind of giving them a task and seeing how they get there, because they may get there different ways. That way we make sure that we get to what we need to be without 20 clicks, but more like 2, which I think that's the struggle right now. The other thing is, based on your knowledge, I think the bilingual capabilities is important. And one thing, like for example, right now is that we, I think you mentioned here, less is more, especially when it comes to, we have a newsletter that goes out with our water bill, for example. And right now we have a QR code that translates things in Spanish. I've talked to a lot of folks, they don't use it just because it's just not intuitive, where they see it and they're like, okay. From a strategy standpoint, do you recommend more so less is more to make sure we have the actual written content on the newsletter that people actually have in front of them? Or the digital version is still something that is more feasible? For our more diverse populations.
Yeah, right. So, what I tend to see more frequently is that there is at least a portion of it translated and then to continue on to, have it on there. When I look at bringing someone on that's bilingual, it's to actually make sure the translations are correct, because as we all know, or many of us know, Google Translate doesn't hit that thing perfect. It does a good job, but it's, it's gonna have some stuff that's off. So yeah, we're always looking for ways to try to make sure that the content is correct. But then also, you know, to your point, if it's just a QR code on something, like, are they gonna see that? Or they're like, oh, that's just gonna take me to the website, or like how abundantly apparent. So if it starts out with some Spanish, and I know you have limited space too, you're
Sure.
not, you know, you're front and back, and maybe that's about it or
Sure.
something, right? So using that space in the way you can the most, but if you can get it as much translated as possible, and then say continue reading on here with that QR code to take them specifically to a Spanish page, not a page that they then have to translate into Spanish, you know, that would be something I would look at for sure.
Yeah, and then I say that because too, like, I got a call last night asking about when bulk is, because they needed it, their own Spanish speaking, asking when bulk was. And so I tried to do it on my phone, look it up. It was really hard. The mobile capability is very different than the website, so I had to go on the website.
Right.
But we do have a lot of folks that can't even look it up online, but everybody does have a phone. So
right.
at least if I would have sent her the exact link to a text, she maybe would have been able to just click on it and see it in Spanish, but we don't even have that
Yep.
capability right now. And so, so anyways, and we don't know who speaks Spanish and who speaks English. We really don't, but we know what the demographics show, and we have to be inclusive of that. So anyways, thank you so much. I think the focus group in the software that you mentioned, where you can kind of see, is very interesting to figure out how people are navigating through our site. So very exciting to kind of
Right.
use this information to create
Yeah,
some
and that
strategy.
software is really cheap too. It's like, you know, I think like $10 a month kind of stuff, you know, I mean, so you can really get a
Yeah.
lot of information from it and
Sure.
do that really well, so, yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks
Yeah,
so much. That's all I have,
absolutely. My
Mayor. Thank
pleasure.
you.
Councilman Driscoll.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very useful, I think, for all of us here. And I would echo comments of my colleague, Mr. Merritt. I think I agree with your recommendations here. And any way we can make the site, you know, more user-friendly and much more efficient, I think that will be a big step forward, you know, in our communication policy with everyone. And I particularly like the idea of adding, you know, the bilingual capabilities there, so we can include everyone in, you know, essential communications.
Right.
But I just think, yeah, it's a lot of good issues you brought up, so
Excellent.
thanks very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other comments or questions at this time? Thank you.
All right.
Really
Thank you for your
appreciate it.
time. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to say one more thing, just to supplement what Jackie said. It's very decentralized in the city, and so as Jackie became aware, and Chris, and all of you already know, we have a great team in Parks doing a great job. We have a great team in all the big public-facing departments. And so it's a challenge to kind of, you know, understand what is happening everywhere. But we have a lot of people in different departments doing great work, and so I just wanted to applaud that and say it's not all us. We have decentralized teams in almost every department who are doing social media, who are updating the content. And so it's a lot of people, and sometimes the challenge for us is just finding the best practices and making sure it's uniform and saying, hey, this worked well in sustainability, so let's, you know, replicate that win across all departments. So anyway, it's a lot of hands and a lot of people. And so
Right.
Jackie, we
Absolutely.
appreciate your
Yeah.
time.
Well, thank you.
I have one more
Go ahead.
question. I'm so sorry, Mayor. Is that okay?
You thought you did.
Sorry, since I have you here. Is there a way to, when people, because I think that we have so many great events, and that's one of the biggest assets, that we have so much going on all the time. Is there a way where people can, and have you seen this where in other cities maybe, where people can actually look at our calendar and actually add that to their own personal calendar?
Absolutely.
From our calendar?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
there's multiple ways to do that, and I'm not familiar with Civic Plus specifically, if they have
Sure.
some. But even just saving it as an ICS from your
desktop.
computer and loading it onto that page, and there's even a way, and we've done this, Allen Americans is a client of ours, where the entire schedule was a file that they could download, and so like for them it was every game, but for you,
Yeah.
every event. So that it was
Yeah.
one file that they were able to download to get all of the events. So-
That would be amazing. That would be
Yeah.
something that we could.
Yeah, so,
Obviously, social can play a big part in that.
Yes,
Make sure that
on Facebook,
everything's
you can
up
add it to your calendar.
right.
But if we know we want to have like all of our parks events on our, I mean, it makes it easier so we don't forget, but.
Yeah, I would
Okay,
highly
great,
recommend
thank
that.
you.
That's-
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, all right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A3, update on possible November 2022 bond election.
Good afternoon, Council Mayor, Mike Mashburn, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Zoom, so you could be able to get you can just put it in the corner.
Yep.
It's nice of Kira to show up.
Yeah, yeah. thank you.
Oh,
What time is it over there?
all right. So a couple weeks ago, I was here before you, and I gave you a robust 32-slide presentation on all the projects happening and that could happen. And what we heard was we want all of it and more. So I'm here with a 52-page presentation. No, I'm not. One-slide presentation. So just to discuss what could possibly go on a bond in November. Several projects in the works. Charles John, myself, Sherelle, Kevin Menchow met after that meeting and discussed what we heard from council, what Charles has heard in his one-on-ones, and came up with a list that could be palatable perhaps for the public and council. So on that list you see before you, these prices are a moving target, as I mentioned last, for a couple meetings ago, or a couple weeks ago. Prices are escalating. I can't tell you if we start some of these in a year or two, what these will be. If they come up, they go down. So I put some kind of general numbers behind these, and it also depends on the scale that you want some of these at. One in particular, the top one I'll draw your attention to, Farmers Branch Park at $3 to $5 million. That one had some variances in it, some pretty interesting signage at the entry point, some shade coverings, and then most importantly, the synthetic turf fields. So if that was a desire, those will significantly increase the price of that project, probably about $1 million or maybe just over per field if we wanted to go that direction. So it's a $3 to $5 million price tag. Squire Park at 2 to 2.5. The park portion at the Branch Connection, which is the outdoor space, we will move forward with the indoor renovation, which is part of the ARPA funds that we have already acquired. Trex Pathway at the John Burke Nature Preserve. Right now, we're going with decomposed granite that is throughout to keep a natural look. This is kind of the Rolls Royce of a pathway, right? So $1.5 million roughly. Barn Phase 2, you may say, what's Phase 2? We don't have Phase 1 yet. Well, we'll talk about Phase 1 at the regular meeting here in just a moment. Phase 2 is what we refer to as the museum portion, but it is a little bit more than that. Certainly we'll have some traveling exhibits that can come through, but we'll make it interesting too. I had mentioned Hillary and her team trick you into liking history. So my family and I love escape rooms. One of the ideas she had is history of escape rooms and create an escape room in this very functional open space. Also, the main phase of that particular project will be used for rentals often. This will allow for a lot of the smaller programs, 30, 40, 50 people, to use that open space as well. Recreation Center exterior, he said go for the gusto. We want to see what's in the picture, $1.2 million. And then the log cabin reassembly, I mentioned there's 3 log cabin structures that will need to be moved if we move forward with the barn. You'll see that contract later this evening at the regular session. This would be to reassemble them in a different location at another date. So the price tag, roughly $10.875 million to $13.875. And with that, I will open it up to discussion.
Mr. Mashburn, thank you. I know at the last meeting, the idea of this kind of came up by a few people. And so, my thoughts on this are we're making a lot of improvements in this community. We have some unique situations coming up later this year as we explore the budget. I think this is something that could definitely be absorbed while we still, look for ways to cut and make things a little bit easier on people as we move out into the future. But looking at some of these projects, looking at what's happening in the macroeconomic kind of universe, I don't see rates getting lower next year, the year after, further out into time. I don't see cost getting much cheaper further out into time. And so if we want to make these improvements now and do it to take care of a lot of our facilities, a lot of our parks, a lot of things that need to be upgraded to kind of keep things going, I think that right now we have a great window of opportunity to take advantage of what's in front of us to get all of this done that benefit the most amount of people in our community, because we're going from the Branch Connection to the historical park to parks that for a long time haven't really, in areas of town that haven't had a lot of improvements to them. And so I think being able to spread this money across a big area of our city and make a lot of these improvements, and as we've talked about, and I know we talked about at the strategic planning session, doing it the right way, I do think is important. And being able to handle, finishing what we started in the nature preserve and a lot of these things. I think we have some great projects that so many people are going to get to enjoy, and so many different projects that as we've kind of explored, have opportunities to not be revenue neutral, but to generate revenue, bring more people to the city, and allow them to experience what Farmers Branch is, which for the past 10, 15 years, a lot of the things that we've done are how are we going to do that? And these are, assets that aren't just one-time specific events that are geared towards some of those things. These are ongoing that people can use for 10, 20, 30 years. And when it comes to bonds, in my opinion, in capital improvement projects, if you're going to fund it this way, they need to last a very long time. And that's what a lot of these are. So, this is the only reason that I would recommend it. I know others have recommended it as well. And so I wanted to bring this up to explore it because if we're going to put it in the November election for the community to vote on, I think they should have the opportunity to have their say. But what this allows us to do as well is to potentially make good during the budget season to say, how are we going to absorb this so that it's not an increase for people and we find other ways. I guess it's always a opportunity cost, right? Will it be included in the rate, and hopefully a rate that, in my opinion, might be lower than where it is now to help a lot of people that, were surprised a month ago when they opened their mail, me included. So it's, how can we do that? And they'll get to see the effects of that a month and a half before they would have to take a vote on this. But, this time gives staff enough time to prepare and other things that allows us to educate the community and show that good faith as we address budget season this coming fall. So with that, I will open it up for discussion. Councilmember Ratana, I'll start with you.
Well, this is something that I was gonna bring up during future agenda, but it may be privy to this conversation since it's also a type of amenity. But I know one thing that Mayor, you and I have talked about, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is regarding really planning for some satellite structures on our west side area. And so I don't know the best way of going about to be able to start planning for that from a financial standpoint, where we don't have any increases in our taxes or anything like that, but also plan for future kind of satellite structures in that area. And so I don't think including this, because this is very much park specific and we already are working on a project there, but would this be a type of option, or just curious to see what we've done in the past, since I've only been here for a few years.
The idea behind what could be an opportunity on the west side, in my opinion, is going to take a lot more planning. We would have to acquire some property or be gifted.
It'd be a public-private type of partnership.
And so, but I also think that there's some opportunities that have not been explored, but could be explored, that could be a creative financing opportunity that would truly need to be a public-private partnership, not only with people on the west side, but also probably within the HOAs and some of the stuff over there, to where you could work out a structure that made sense. For me on this one, purely these projects right now, because it's going to take time and energy to vet out what opportunity would work best over there, and then pitch it, I think, and have more meetings with the HOA and everyone else and say, is everyone on board with setting something up that makes sense? Because it's a much bigger project than any of these where we own all the assets and can put things to work immediately.
No, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Just curious, as we talked about this, as far as this goes, I'm definitely, in all transparency, just want to make sure that we continue to have conversations with our constituents about it. But I think a lot of these priorities are a long time coming, and I think eventually it will have really long-term positive effects on our city. So thank you so much. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Williams.
No, I think this is a great way for us to reinvest into our city and to give our citizens and our residents a way to vote for that reinvestment, and it not just come from council and budget and staff. So I think this could be a great thing. I would just encourage, like our previous conversation, how this gets communicated, because I love the idea of it being a little more broad, so we don't pigeon ourselves down to where we make it too specific to where we can't grow a little bit in it as, you know, as those moving parts kind of shift and change and costs may change. So I like that it's a more broad, but the fear with having a bond that's so broad that way is really getting citizens to buy in and residents to be excited about it, because it's, you know, oh, it's a Parks and Rec bond, but, you know, without there being something to kind of tie in. But, Mike, I know you do a great job showing us the 52,000 slides, and the wonderful, photos that go along with that. So, I'm sure that you can come up with something, really, you know, to grab the attention of our residents so that they believe in this project as well. And know that you have my 100% support, and I'll get out there and push that drive as well, so.
Councilmember Lynn?
Thanks for the presentation. Mike and I had a conversation earlier, and so there's a couple of things that concern me. And one of them in particular revolves around the barn Phase 2. And I guess by listening to this meeting and this conversation so far, as well as that from a few weeks ago, this council is taking a noticeably different turn from what Councilman Baumgartner and Norwood had said when they were on council, and that was that they were adamantly opposed to the museum, not the barn, but to the museum. And
Go ahead. I'll
and
add.
so they had gone on record and saying that they did not think that that was something that was needed as part of this project. But the way we're moving forward, I guess the general attitude is you all want to go ahead with that portion or that additional phase of the project, yes?
I'm not going to speak for anyone else. You know, they weren't against the museum. If I recall correctly, they wanted the barn to succeed and then use the success of the barn to then fund the museum. And so that was how that was kind of couched. And I am not against stripping the museum out of this and saying, let's build the barn, which we plan on doing. And if it's successful, we can then work within hotel motel as we originally tried to do in the future to add on or build to it at that time. Now, I know there's a lot of people in the town that would love to see the museum now, but that was what was discussed in the past when the barn originally came through. It was not, we're against it. It's, let's succeed with it. Let's walk before we can run. Let's succeed with the barn, and if that works, then we'll add the museum. But it also gets back to, you know, while we have some ideas on the table for what the museum could be, I think that needs to be vetted through the Historical Park Board a lot more than just build it and then we'll figure it out and then people will come. It's no, let's.
Well, we had one person pushing pretty hard for the museum, and it was almost reaching a breaking point with that. But nevertheless, part of that original plan was that the barn would be paid for from funds raised through the Hotel Motel Fund. Now, we're not going to do that. So I'm not going to be on the.
Yeah, fund balance. General fund balance.
But that would have to come to council.
But there's also a grant.
Matching grant.
There is a grant, I understand that, but we had discussed back in some of those budget meetings that Hotel Motel Fund would be used to pay for the barn facility. And it, you know, we already spent $300-something thousand on engineering plans for the facility, but it was understood that it wasn't going to be built till we had money in the fund to cover that. Now, I'm not going to be here to vote on whether this goes forward or not.
We all get to vote on it
Well-
potentially in November.
No, to decide whether council puts this forward. That's not me. But assuming that you do, I still think if your intent is to fund the barn early, then the city, the taxpayers should be reimbursed somehow as hotel motel funds come in to cover the cost of that facility. So just like we're doing, somebody else is going to be servicing the debt on the new athletic facility. That's sort of what I see as being necessary. Otherwise, that whole plan is out the window from what we had discussed with Mike and John. And then this is something totally new.
But also, I think that was discussed before COVID, and one of the things we have
What?
to, but COVID kind of changed that too, because the fund was reduced so significantly when it came to the hotel motel tax. Like, that wasn't with planning when we planned that was taking into consideration the hotels that were coming, all of the positive economics that were coming to our city, but then COVID happened, that fund was diminished, and so I think that's what opened up the conversation again to how else can we, because we know that there was support from a lot of folks on the barn and what it could do to our historical park, especially as we're engaging in more and more events in the area, which I believe are actually the barn is gonna increase the hotel motel taxes because there's gonna be more people coming to use the barn for all of these events. But I see the barn differently than I see and maybe it's just me, the athletic facility, also because the athletic facility is gonna be run a lot more differently than the barn, which is really an asset of the historical park. I know we'll have probably a separate entity to help us with that, but that was also a conversation that we had pre-COVID as well. And so I think that's something we do need to take into consideration, when it comes to the funding aspect of it. And the fact that in conversations that we've had with staff, I think that having this asset at the historical park is actually gonna help us to bring more people in to experience all the things that we're doing. And so I would hate for us to wait, because right now I think we're getting to a point, if I'm not mistaken, that our hotel motel tax is becoming, getting bigger and bigger now that things have opened up. But I personally would hate to if we have an opportunity, now, I would hate to wait to do that, because it seems to me that you're saying that we should pause on the barn
I
altogether.
didn't say that. Don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say that.
No.
And I've never said that I was anti-barn. In fact, I brought
Well,
the
you
barn up.
have in the past.
Okay. No, I brought the barn up when we were having the discussion between the barn and Oya Park. So what I'm saying, I'm trying to talk about the financing mechanism for the barn. Okay? I am not arguing with you. I think if we have the barn, it will be a useful and it'll be an asset to the whole park. Not talking about that. I'm talking strictly about the financing and who is paying for it. Originally, it was going to be the hotel motel fund, which, we get money from all the tournaments and whatnot, and just regular hotel stays, all of that was going to be used to fund it. Yes, COVID impacted that, and so it pushed that barn project out further. I remember having those discussions. So I'm trying to work from a history of a prior council that you were on also that had these discussions. Now, hotel motel is not going to pay for it. We're paying for it.
With a grant.
The resident taxpayers are paying for it. And so I just want people to fully know and understand what it is that's being expected of them.
Well, then say it fully. Well, say it fully, because it's not just, it's coming out of fund balance, and we have a 2-year grant. We have 2 years to
I
use this
understand.
grant, which is not coming from taxpayer money. So if you're gonna say that, then say it fully. So it's coming out of fund balance that's already existed, which I'm not sure how that has
What-
anything to do with what we're talking about with this, because this is about barn phase 2. It's not
Well,
the financing
It's all
of the
gonna-
barn.
It's all going to tie together, but again, those things, those elements related to that, I feel as though they should be coming out of hotel motel fund. If we're paying for them early, then we should make a commitment to reimburse our fund as hotel motel funds allow.
We can take a look at what opportunities are available for that during the budget season. But I would also contend doing it this way, utilizing the grant, which offset the
Understand.
cost increase by waiting 2 years. When hotel motel builds back up, we will have those dollars to be able to deploy into that region at a much more substantial impact, in my opinion, rather than paying back the barn, which, we can also look, if this thing's supposed to generate revenue and hits projections that we've seen, there's opportunities there to buy it down with the success of the barn as well. So, there's multiple options there, but as we're exploring the I-35 corridor, as we're looking at things that we need to do there to help build that up, I think having hotel motel tax to put into other things rather than an asset that should perform, I think would be a better use of money in the future. But I'm not against us looking at, is there a way to restore fund balance, which is already high? We're above our normal levels. This isn't going to deplete it down to the bare minimum. We're still going to have a healthy cushion. So I think, but I'm not against, in terms of this discussion, which is this and what's on the board, taking barn phase 2 out and saying that needs to be based off the success of the barn and hotel motel in the future.
Well, I think that would be a prudent thing to do at this time, just my opinion. But I would hope that you all that continue on this council would certainly take a look at how this will impact fund balance. The surplus of fund balance over what we need, that's taxpayer money. That's the citizens' money sitting there.
And businesses.
And
businesses, don't forget.
And businesses too.
73%
And
of
so,
it.
at some point, it'd be nice to give everybody a little break, but, if you're gonna spend their money, it better be a rock-solid plan.
No disagreement there.
I think all of us are in agreement on that part. We don't wanna, we're not here to just spend taxpayer money. I think one of the things that made us really successful during COVID was the fact that we had a fund balance that we were able to utilize. And so I think that's still important. So I think from a fiduciary perspective, we're all on the same page. It's just how do we use the different mechanisms we have in our power, in our presence right now with the grants and all of these, so we don't lose out on that funding that ends up, like the mayor said, is gonna end up saving us a lot. Because there's gonna be a lot of things, as the mayor mentioned, that we're gonna need to think about as we expand I-35, as we look at the Mustang Station redevelopment, as we look at, the west side and other areas. And so I just want, for the record, just want to say, I think we're all in agreement that we want to be, fiscally responsible when it comes to our taxpayer funds. I just also think we need to look at all of the different opportunities we have to be able to match funds right now. And so, anyways, just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I hope that you all will look at maybe how you can take advantage of those grant funding opportunities, as well as I can't say borrow because we're not borrowing, that's not the right word, but it's almost pushing forward, if you will, an accelerated plan versus how we originally had tried to map that out. And if that just doesn't work, so be it, but I think you're obligated to consider it.
Does anyone have any other comments to that?
The only thing that I would add to the barn phase 2 topic, and not the barn phase 1, on that phase 2, the only thing about that is that it's the smaller part of the venue that allows for is that my understanding, Mike? That allows for our residents to utilize it, like, say, for a baby shower, and we've eliminated a lot of those venues out of our rec center. And that's why leaving that barn phase 2 is more appealing to me, because we are using taxpayer dollars. And so to utilize it in a way that they can more readily take advantage of and utilize that space for, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because otherwise it does become much more of a revenue generating, and if we can, anytime that we can offset both, that can be a revenue generating and at the same time serve our residents and our citizens, since they already paid for it, without having to pay again, that just makes sense to me. So And in a budget, in a bond option, they have a vote in it. They get to have a say in it. And, you know, the difference between $1.5 and $2 million in a almost $14 million bond, I don't see why it would hurt to leave that there. I don't think that that's gonna be a make it or break it, on that vote. And in fact, it may be really appealing. That's just my 2 cents.
Councilmember Merritt?
Thank you. Mike, thank you for the presentation. I will say that as we get off of the Atomic DC presentation just ahead, communication is imperative here. And we've seen negative situations in the past where the lack of information or the vacuum of information has been, you know, detrimental to advancing. And I think it's paramount in this that when we talk about 3 to 5 million on Farmers Branch, that we're inclusive of what those elements are. And we have, as a council and a community and parks and all the other boards and commissions, have to do a yeoman's effort in communicating those facts to the community at large. The opportunity to take Farmers Branch and Squire Park, bringing them into the 20th century, into this particular year, is super important. I mean, we need to invest and reinvest in our parks, and the opportunity that sits in front of us to take it up to the excellent levels that we all, you know, seek and demand are really important. And so I'm supportive of that, and I think we have to, and I'll be on board with your points about being fiscally responsible and looking at how we fund these and fund them appropriately, and making sure that we're doing the right thing by our citizens, both today and 20 and 30 years from now. I mean, these lasting effects, and I know I've lived in Farmers Branch since 1989, and I know we have done very little to Farmers Branch Park in that time frame. Very little. I didn't say nothing, very little. So the opportunity, as we are here 30 years, if we have a lasting improvement to Farmers Branch Park, it may last 20, 25, 30 years going into the future. And those are generations that we don't see and that we need to service as we sit here in these chairs. So I think it's very important that we look at this. I am super, you know, hypersensitive to the barn sequence, if we will. It's only exacerbated by it's shown here on the project. Barn phase 1 is not yet approved, although we have grant funding and we have the removal and deconstruction of log cabins on tonight's agenda. That doesn't seem like we have a cohesive story yet to tell, and that's problematic to me. And I'd like it to be more in order and more in sequence. Now, we've talked about it. We know we need to do these things, don't get me wrong, and you know, but we need to communicate that we know the path that we're going. Barn phase 1 is not approved, it's not a done deal yet. And we're already talking about moving cabins and what have you. So to the outsider and even to the insider here around the table, do we know what we're doing here? And that's troublesome. And I know we know what we're doing, but we haven't got a good story. And that 2-minute story or that elevator pitch needs to be rock solid. And I don't sense that it is right now. I know we've got 1.4 million in grant hanging in the balance, and I want to make sure that we take advantage of that. But how do we take advantage of that on the budget cycle that is, you know, addressing where the funds are coming from and how will they be allocated, et cetera. We are running, you know, with more revenue than we have in the past for a multitude of reasons, not just because our taxes are high. And if I hear, well, I won't say that. It's all over. And so we're not alone in that. And so do we do the right thing by that? Can we take advantage of that? Can we, be, compassionate, if you will, if that's the right term, to our tax-paying folks, which includes the businesses and the residents? Maybe there's an opportunity, but we're also going to be challenged in the following budget year for, state caps that are going to be put on us. And so that'll be a totally different animal that we'll have to deal with. So the long and the short of it, I want us to spend wisely, and I need everyone to know that I'm in support of these things, but I want the messaging to be very, very solid. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Merritt, I just want to mention on the messaging, and we've talked about, it is a little bit, the sequence is a little bit, we kind of know it internally, but the message does need to go out. Part of it is just like tonight, we need to have that direction on barn phase 2, because one of the outcomes of tonight could have been, we don't want to do phase 2, in which case then we'd have a whole different messaging.
Correct.
So after tonight, I think we kind of have at least the fuller story for at least the barn project, that we can certainly get that out, absolutely. Because I'm not even sure if the Historical Park Board knows kind of the story.
They're well aware. Yeah.
Even for the phase 2.
Yeah, we have our board chair in the back,
Oh,
Johannes.
okay, that's right, okay. So anyway, I just want to leave that, that's part of the disjointment of the
Yeah.
stories. We didn't know what the council wanted to do. Now I think we do, and we can move forward.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilman Driscoll.
My turn, okay. First, I'd like to say, number one, I think we are all fiscally responsible. I think we all believe in our fiduciary responsibilities to spend general funds, all funds, intelligently and wisely, and get solid returns for our investments. Number two, I'd like to say I'm in favor of us moving forward with offering the bond, to the citizens this fall. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then number three, to the mayor's point about kind of the overall macroeconomic environment, we all know we're coming out of COVID and everything we've been through. The economy is very robust. There's jobs that are waiting, so our city is growing, people are moving here, businesses are growing and expanding. A lot of the sessions we've had, we're talking about other massive investments here in Farmers Branch. And so I think the timing of this is good, and also the rate environment is favorable, and it's only going to be less favorable next year and the year after, probably. Then number three, I like the approach also of bundling this and not doing things piecemeal. As David alluded to, later tonight, we've got a vote and talk about, funds to dismantle the cabins, et cetera. So instead of trying to look at the parts kind of on a piecemeal basis, I like the idea of putting it all together in a package. And I would just also, another point, outline at the top of your slide, it says options, project options. So I think today we kind of need to look at the big picture, and there's going to be lots of fine tuning here, just on the Farmers Branch part. Do we want to go with grass, artificial turf? Do we want to, et cetera, et cetera. So those are big figures, and there's a lot of options there. And I think going forward, we can fine tune these. And, with the museum, I think we need to kind of discuss that further. The necessity of it, the need for it, how it would perform as far as as well as the barn being an asset and bringing in revenue. So I think there's just a whole lot of things we need to flesh out here. But again, thinking back to being on the bond committee a few years ago, I know when all of us were doing that, we had no idea. Would the voters step up and approve it? We had 3 big proposals there, and they were all overwhelmingly approved. And that was after town hall type of meetings where we got lots of citizen input. And so, in summary, I'm in favor of this, and I think it makes a lot of sense to lump these together, but we've still got to do a lot of homework to kind of fine tune how we're going to approach all of these and exactly what amenities and options we want in each of the parks as it stands right now. And so that's kind of where I am.
Amenities and options. Councilmember Driscoll, what are you,
Well,
what are your
like-
thoughts there?
Well, I'm just saying, we're
So we could
talking,
talk about those for 2 years.
well, like whether we want to have the barn first and then do a museum later, or do it all together. And again, with the Farmer's Branch, the cost of doing grass fields or the artificial turf, which I think you said be like $1 million per field. I just think maybe we need to flesh out some of those things a little bit. And certainly before we would, put it out, to the community.
This has to be, we have to make a decision by middle of August, right, Amy, to get this on the November ballot?
Is it that far in advance to call the election?
Sooner the better, but I think that's the last.
Days at least.
And
90 days?
I think it's 90 days.
In our budget.
So August. So basically, we need to decide before the budget. Councilmember Lund?
So I think Councilman Driscoll brings up a good point. You know, when Mike showed his presentation originally, there were a lot of what could be. Here's a lot of items, okay? Now, there weren't necessarily dollar figures associated with each one of them, but it was just a bullet point.
Rough estimates, yeah.
Of here's what could be.
Rough cost.
Well, that's going to be your job moving forward, is to try to narrow that down and hone those figures down to what really makes best sense, economic sense, and then however you package this in to present, not only to the taxpayers for town hall meetings, if that's what you're going to have, but
Of course.
For the bond election. So just detailing it out further, what each one of these things entails.
I think,
Even though you're not voting on a item.
That would be
yeah,
a
it's
nice
not
step, though.
item by item. I would say by second meeting in June, could you get us a little bit more detail that allows us to truly weigh these options?
Yeah, honestly, what I really need to know is, do you like all of these? Do you want to remove one or two? And then we can start from there. This is an incredible amount of work on top of an incredible amount of work. And then the less time we give to prepare the bond, the less effective it's going to be with the voters. I think we've got a history of getting information out, involving the community, having success, at least in my tenure here. This will be no different. So I just need clear direction on what to do so we can get moving fast.
Clear direction. I'm going to throw something out. A, float these by all the boards and commissions affected, again, for further input based on 52,000 pages of pictures and possibilities. That narrows down, but while we're working on that, I would love to see, which I'll just take Farmers Branch Park.
So the boards have seen this.
And they're all good with all of them?
I would say the Trex pathway is one that we need to, because that came up after the fact. That would be the only one on there.
Gotcha. Well, I guess, what we would need to see is the true cost with turf fields or not for Farmers Branch Park. Squire Park, as you've envisioned it, would love to know 2 to 2.5. Like, are we planning for the worst case scenario in all these, or can we refine the numbers a little bit better to say, are we going out for 14 million, or are we going out for 12?
And we actually already have, I have TMP working on that, or not TMP, excuse me, Quorum working on that right now. Yeah.
And so, the reason I kind of threw out the second meeting in June is we're not really doing any kind of action items next meeting. And so that first meeting in June, that'd be a lot to throw on anyone's potential first meeting. And so the second one, I think, gives you time to look at these a little bit more closely and not have a little bit more time so that we can, A, discuss it then, potentially in early July, so that it's included in the budget package that goes out, and we can call the election with enough time to get it on the ballot by November. And it allows us to start couching this with our constituents early on about what's potentially coming, where we're going, the discussions to be had, and ultimately a final decision. And then I think we can formulate a communications plan as well that gives us the elevator pitch and the story we want to tell at town hall meetings and other stuff that really engage the public on this. So does that kind of work for everybody?
Works for me.
think it should give us time to kind of fine tune it and get, you know, firmer estimates.
Okay, all right,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right.
Council may convene, A4, discuss future agenda items. Does anyone have anything? Oh, that was easier. All right, B1, council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. Consultation with city attorney regarding code enforcement ordinances. Council may convene into a closed executive session pursuant to section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code to deliberate the appointment, employment, selection process, city manager. We will recess, grab dinner, come back in. The time is 5:10. Thank you.